Can you imagine how long ago I got tired? What happened to you? Can you imagine how long ago I got tired of answering that question? But the fact of the matter is, my physical form, my story, is indeed part of the very powerful message that I believe surrounds attitude. I was on a plane going to Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and a lady was sitting beside me on the plane. The plane took off. She seemed to be uncomfortable. That's not uncommon. All she did was look at me and go, one word, thalidomide. Thalidomide was never meant to be given to pregnant women. In fact, it was a sedative, and it was supposed to be so safe, they thought that anybody could take it. Now, the drug was banned in 1963, thank God, because it by then had only deformed over 20,000 babies. It could have been hundreds of thousands had the drug continued to live on. Now, it's interesting because this is what she went on to say. I didn't take those pills. Something told me to throw them in the garbage. And I am so glad I did, because I was blessed with healthy, normal babies. The point is, thalidomide was a terrible, terrible thing. But that's not how I see it in my own personal life. My life started in a very unorthodox fashion. There is no question that being born without arms is not something people would wish for, right? They called us the victims. I disagree. August 23rd, 1985 was the first time in my life I ever considered how my own mother and father must have felt the first time they held me. And then it occurred to me an even more powerful thought. My mom was 55 years old the first time she held me, and my dad was 53, and I was an orphan in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, because my birth family were consulted and counseled and advised to simply sign papers and give me up. Because in 1960, babies born with severe handicaps had no life. So on the fourth day of my life, I was homeless. Enter my life, the changers. Hilda Law, Jack Law. So Hilda was my primary caregiver. Hilda had an attitude that is very difficult for me to describe. She saw something that nobody else saw. And that was, yes, indeed, a positive potential. They loved me, they took me home, they were charitable, they were very, very powerful in their faith, but not one time did I view them as nice, okay? I had to make my bed every morning before school. I had to pick up my toys every night before bed. I had to vacuum the carpet 3 times a week because Mother expected neatness, wondering every day, do you really love me? I knew that I would not easily climb Mount Everest. I knew there were certain things that were impossible for me. And then one day I found a piano. And that was huge. I'm looking at my feet, I'm watching the piano, I'm thinking, I'm gonna suck at this too. That's how I felt. But Mom heard me play, and she came racing down to the basement. And she said, was that you? I gave the standard 10-year-old answer. Do you see anybody else down here? And then she made me play it again. And then she stood behind the piano crying. I would ask my mother, in fact, quite frankly, it was the week she met my son, why did you cry behind the piano that day? She said, you don't really understand, do you? What? How hard it was to be with you every day, to see the looks, to see the stares, to hear the insults. But more than anything, the hardest part, Alvin, was to push you beyond belief. It was within every illogical thought in my brain to not do that to you, to not force you, to not challenge you, to not take you to extremes that people thought I was cruel with you. Do you have any idea what that felt like? That's why I cried. Hello, Mrs. Law. My name is Blaine McClary. I'm the band director for the Yorkton City Band Program. Do you have a son named Alvin? We do. Does Alvin have a talent for music that you're aware of? Do you think he'd like to be in the band? Well, Mr. McClary, probably a good time to tell you that Alvin sort of has no arms. Hello? But when I walked in the house and saw my mom smiling in 1971, I'll never forget that smile. I'll never forget that day. She had a great smile, ugly teeth, great smile. She goes, honey, I got news for you. You're gonna be in the band. What band? School band. Well, how'd that happen? I don't know. We're gonna go to the school and find out right now. Get in the car, we're going to the school. On the way to the school, she told me about the first phone call that happened 6 weeks earlier. She didn't tell me about it because the guy hung up. He didn't want to hurt my feelings. And then she said, but he called back this morning. He says he's got an instrument for you to play. A trombone. A trombone, for God's sake. And like a game show host, he went, what do you think? I was 11. What do you think I thought? It was the stupidest looking thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. Well, can you move the slide with your foot? Yeah, I can do that. Well, I can do that. That's cool. Can you make this noise? Okay, good. Can you do it in the mouthpiece and move the slide? Yeah. Well, this noise came out. 11-year-olds love noise, don't they? But I particularly was affected. I loved that sound, just a feeling. That day changed the pathway of my life. What really changed my world? Was it the trombone? Not exactly. The girls didn't want to date me because they couldn't quite grasp holding on to this. That's what makes my wife Darlene that much more special. She doesn't see the outside. She sees the human. And there is a difference. My life in music is what changed it all. Music taught me that life does not change in one day, in 1 week, in 1 year. It takes steps after step after step after step after step. All right, you can clap for that if you'd like. Why did I just do that? To show off? Yeah. To impress you? Yeah. I want to impress you. Because of my ego? No. No, see, that was the most important thing that I learned in my professional life. In my opinion, and it is my opinion, you earn joy. It is not a human right. You attain success. I got a label. It's fixed right on my forehead. And it used to bug me until it occurred to me, I just have to change what the label says. That's all I got to do. It's not going to be easy because I'm asking society an awful lot to see the human inside the disability. But the fact is, it took me a long time to come to that conclusion. They've all got labels. Let's just change the label. Let's change the label from victim to victor. Let's change the label to one that says, I am who I am.
That was
Welcome,
powerful.
D1.
That was powerful. Welcome, folks. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Dune and Friends. As you've seen in the video, we have Mr. Alvin Law joining us for the hour here today. And before I bring him on to speak with us and have a chat here for this afternoon, I'd like to maybe just give a bit of a background beyond the video there. Alvin, hopefully you can still hear me in the green room there, my friend. We'll bring you on in just a moment here. Wonderful. So Alvin Law has been changing people's lives for almost 60 years. He is one of the most powerful living examples of the sheer power of positive approach to our challenges. That's what you first notice when you see him. Now, Alvin was born without arms. By 5 days of age, he was also homeless after his birth family chose not to keep him. Now, as Alvin emphatically states, it was the best thing that could have happened. Does it really mean that, absolutely, really? Absolutely. Now, Alvin was adopted by a couple in the mid-50s who were empty nesters and literally changed his story from tragedy to triumph. They not only taught him to use his feet for hands, but also created a culture of belief in the impossible that Alvin lives and speaks about every day. He's a Canadian Hall of Fame professional speaker, and in 2018 was also inducted into Canada's Disability Hall of Fame. One person, two Halls of Fame. Now, what a story he must have, huh? Indeed, absolutely. Now, Alvin has been speaking to audiences around the world since 1981. He is the author of the international best-selling book, Alvin's Law of Life. He is a world-class musician too, and he's recognized by the guys who plays the drums with his feet. In fact, he is the subject of a GoCast video, one of which you've seen there early on this broadcast here, and that's had over 38 million views, and on Facebook alone. So, what's your label? Is the essence of Alvin Law, who believes in the biggest obstacle that we all have to face. Really, very simple: is ourselves. Attitude is everything, indeed. So with that introduction, friends, help me in welcoming our guest today, Mr. Alvin Law. Alvin, how are you doing today, my friend? Can you hear me?
I can't hear you quite yet.
Oh, you can't hear me. That is strange. So if you can't hear me, we can hear you.
A bit of an issue here, Dune.
Yeah, what you might want to do, Alvin, is I'm going to see if I can rectify that. Can you hear me now?
Try it again. Here we go.
Can you hear me now? Oh, no. Okay, it might be that you need to exit and come back in, Alvin. Yeah. If you could come back in, Alvin, that would be great. I think that's what it is. Yeah, technology, hey? We'll come out and come back in. All right. I will... sorry about the technology glitch there. Alvin is coming to us today from Saskatchewan, from his cottage out there. And this morning, as he was getting ready for this, you noticed that the internet was out. And can you hear me now, Alvin? Testing. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yeah. Wonderful. Now, your voice is a little quiet, so if there's a way to kind of project it further, that'd be great. So tell us more, Alvin. You have a bit of a...
We're having some serious connection issues here.
Yeah, yeah. You have internet outage there on the I guess, cottage this morning, and you're on the sort of phone tethered to your iPad.
Yeah, and I apologize for that. Folks, if you can see behind me, that's my little Saskatchewan Rough Rider shrine. Sorry for all of the people that may be watching this in Edmonton, but what is your team going to be called, by the way? Anyway, the fact of the matter is we're in rural Saskatchewan, and we are having a terrible weather day. So that's probably affecting not only the internet, because we're on an old SaskTel analog system with the internet, but also I am tethered now to my iPhone, and it's getting the best we can out of the signal from across the lake. And I apologize. This is the trouble with our new truth, isn't it? And by the way, I don't call it the new normal, Dune, because I believe there is no normal. There is just life and how we respond. And that's my whole story.
There you go. So thank you so much for joining us for the hour here. And we're going to make our way through this technology challenge as we always do. Tell us, my friend, these summer days, you've been out there at the cottage there. Now, you've been coming there every year for a long time, right? For decades, or how long ago?
Right. So to go into not the entire history of the Law family, but my parents were both immigrants to Canada. My mother was from the United States. She came to Canada in 1908. My father was from the UK. He came to Canada in 1923. Wow. And they met in a little town called Yorkton, or Kenora, Saskatchewan, which is 30 minutes or 15 minutes down the road from the lake. Yeah. This lake was very popular in those days for people of the region. And one day, Dad acquired a small little cottage, and that was in 1948. So they started coming out here that long ago. When I was born and was adopted in Yorkton, I started getting to spend my summers here. And then Darlene and I, my wife, bought our own place in 2006. So we traveled the 1,100 kilometers from Calgary and get to spend a beautiful summer here, whether it's good weather or not. It's just my place of refuge. And typically in the past, until the lockdown, it was my chance to rejuvenate. Because as people may have already understood, as a professional speaker, and you can relate to this, and so all the speakers can, we travel a ton. And
Yeah.
sometimes we need to go someplace where we don't have to travel. But even
Yeah.
more importantly, Dune, these are my roots. This,
Yeah.
this is very special to me, not as a pretty place, but as a place that I really grew into the skin and body of Alvin Law, because there was
Wow.
freedom out here and there
Yeah.
was no judgment out here. And the
Yeah.
people that I grew up knowing were very, very kind to me and very good to me. Because I think a lot of times people think, oh God, you must have had a terrible childhood having no arms. No, I actually had an incredible childhood. And
Hmm.
that's kind of why I think I still have an attitude like I do today. This is
Yeah.
not fabricated. You know me, Dune. This is the real Alvin.
You bet, you bet. And I can empathize and appreciate the idea that it's all relative, isn't it? It's all relative. It's what we expect and it's what we know. Myself, having was born and raised in a war-torn country and very lacking of freedom and prosperity and whatnot, but I was always happy. So happiness and circumstances are quite, two different things. Happiness mostly depends on the way we see our world, doesn't it, Alvin?
There's a movie called "It's a Dog's Purpose." Have you seen that movie?
No, I haven't. How long has it
Well,
been out? Yeah.
it's been out for a long time, and
Okay. Yeah.
it is actually a Canadian production. And I'm only
Hmm.
making reference to it because if you love dogs, you'll both love and hate this movie. But there's a scene in this movie, and what it is there it goes through the different lives of different dogs.
Yeah.
In other words, they believe that dogs get reincarnated, and they go
Mm.
from one body to the next. It's just one of
Yeah.
the facets of the movie. So
Yeah.
there's a very unsettling scene where a dog is chained to a tree in the front yard of a biker house.
Mm-hmm.
And you think this poor dog must be just miserable and tortured until you start to realize that that dog has never known anything else but that
Mm-hmm.
life. So they're not human. They don't have a comparison. They can't
Mm-hmm.
look at dogs going by on a leash going, oh God, I'm jealous. I wish I could go for a walk, because that's not how their brains function. And frankly, I think there's a good tip in that. We all get born into the life we're given. What we do with that life can be easy or hard. And as we've seen with a lot of the reflection and dialogue lately, again, around the protests for racial equality, that's a very complicated subject because
Yeah.
some people can't relate, where other people may totally know the story. And I think that's why I share my story, not because I'm full of myself, Dune, but because
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to remind people to have some perspective on their own lives and take the good with the bad, because everyone's got bad, but we've also got good. And it really is how you look at it.
Yeah, we have a message here from Marilyn. She says, "You've been an inspiration to me since a child. I grew up in Saskatoon and saw you perform often. And my mother told me that you are not different. Yeah, you are you. And if he can do it, so can you. So thank you for shaping my life." So that's from Marilyn Billick.
Thanks, Marilyn. That means a lot to me. In fact, Dune, I think that's the funniest thing about me
Mm,
is I'm going to say something that's going to sound very egotistical, but
mm,
it's quite funny. When I met Darlene in 1991, she'd never seen me. She lived in
mm-hmm,
Edmonton. How ironic. And I lived in Regina. And we started dating. And she came back to Saskatchewan to meet my family. And I warned her that in Saskatchewan, I'm kind of a mythology, kind of a legend, almost famous, like a big celebrity. And she thought I
yeah.
was kidding until the first experience where we went out for dinner and realized, yep, everybody knows Alvin. And I'll tell you what, that's very flattering. But I want your audience to imagine this, okay? Here's the first heavy thought of the day.
Mm,
What would your life be like if every time you stepped out of your private existence, you were being watched? Every
mm,
second of the day. That's what my life is like. I'm constantly being observed. I'm unusual, so I get noticed, which means that
mm,
people are watching my behavior. So not only are they watching how I physically act, but they're also watching how I act as a human being. So when you
mm-hmm,
carry that into your mindset every time you leave the house, it changes how you perform, if I can use that word. It changes
yeah,
how you behave. It
yeah.
changes how you interact with people. Quite frankly, it mentioned it in the video. I should be tired of it by now. But the reality is, I've accepted it. I've accepted this role that I've been given. So, am I pretending? Sure. Let's not be lying about this. I fake it once in a while. If I'm not in a good mood and somebody comes up and wants to talk to the famous Alvin, I'll give them 5 minutes of my time because
Hmm.
I can appreciate how people like that feel. And I learned that, Dune, from a lot of things, but one of the major reasons I learned that is what made me a celebrity in Saskatchewan, and that's
Mm,
doing telethons.
Yep.
specifically a telethon called Telemiracle. But you know, Dune, I posted a photo a couple of weeks ago of my son Vance when he was just barely about 18 months old. And I was doing a telethon in Edmonton, the old
Yeah.
ACT telethon at the
Yeah.
Mayfield Hotel with Blake Emmons and all those big stars of the day from the 80s and 90s. So, you know, it's a life I've chosen, not because of, again, wanting to be on TV, but because of taking a vehicle and using it to create awareness.
You bet. And I heard a little bit of a radio announcer coming out in your voice there. Tell us a bit about that. Was it one of your first careers? Was actually a DJ and a radio announcer? Tell us a bit about that, my friend, and what you learned from that.
Well, first of all, yes, that was a choice that I made in my senior year of high school at the Yorkton Regional High School. And people saw in the video that I was a pretty good musician. That was
Hmm.
my plan. I wanted to be, in the colloquial, I guess, a rock star. Why
Yeah.
not? Who doesn't want to be a rock star, right?
Who
So
doesn't? Yeah.
I see that guitar back there. I'm guessing you have had all kinds of opportunities to be your own rock star, right, dude?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, the fact of the matter is, my guidance counselor talked me off the ledge. He made me understand that I needed to do something that had less to do with how I physically can relate to the world. Because even though I was a great musician, people might not notice the musician. They'd be too busy noticing the almost circus act of me using my feet. So when I
Mm.
decided to go into a profession, I decided to go to Mount Royal College, now MRU, in Calgary, and study broadcasting. I graduated in 1980, and I got my first job in vinyl, classic FM radio, back when you spun records. And
Wow.
I edited audio tape with a razor blade in my toes, Dune. That's how old I am. And I loved it. And what it did was it actually created a fascinating kind of I'm going to use a really expensive word, juxtaposition. I found
Yes.
myself in a studio using my voice, and nobody could understand, you know, from my voice that I had no arms.
Hmm.
I liked that. But the
Yeah.
reality is, what I was really doing was hiding in that booth. I was
Mm.
still young and immature and not sure of myself. So when I decided to take the stage as a speaker, you know, a lot of people are terrified of speaking. I was never terrified of it because I'd been doing it, you know, for so many years of my life that it was a platform I could use. So my voice became my vocal cord, but my attitude became the stage.
Wow. Wow. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Now, how long did you do that gig for? That radio
You know, I
announcer,
was only in
DJ?
radio for 18 months
Yeah.
because coincidence came along and the
Yeah.
International Year of Disabled Persons got me out of the studio into schools, speaking as a function of the year. And I actually got so busy with requests from schools that I asked my boss for a short term leave, but I
Yeah.
never went back. Never went back. I ended up working for a nonprofit organization in Saskatchewan called the Saskatchewan Abilities Council. I worked for them for 4 years, traveling around as a community relations director, doing talks in schools, in community centers, in churches, all over Saskatchewan, not just praising the work of Easter Seals and the Saskatchewan Abilities Council, but also advocating for a new way of people looking at people with disabilities. It came
Wow.
out of course, the International Year, but it was all about timing. You know, I didn't plan any of this, Dune. I never planned to be a professional speaker, and I certainly didn't think it would last this long. I just turned 60
Mm.
this past July,
Mhm.
and I cannot believe how fast that flew. So, you know, I'm still trying to get out there and do my speeches, but now we're stuck in our little boxes, aren't we? Just like this.
Yes, yes. So, wow, that's almost 5 decades of professional speaking, right? And tell us, Alvin, in your journey there, was there a highlight? Maybe let's start with that question. Can you think of a story that resonate with you that is something that you want to share that is a bit of a highlight in your career journey?
So I was working as a speaker, but I wasn't being paid to speak. I was being paid to be the community relations director.
Yeah.
And then this is going to sound like I'm getting off the topic, and I'm not. But I
Hmm.
want to ask your audience its own question. This is one of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
Dune, what do you think are the two most profound words in the entire language of being human? Not just English, every language.
Hmm.
Can you guess? Two most powerful words.
Two most powerful words. I don't know why, but my first thought comes in, what if? What if is
Okay,
pretty
that's a good one.
powerful.
But
Yeah,
here's
what
what
if?
I'm. Here's mine.
Uh-huh.
I'm pregnant. Now, obviously, men don't say that, but women do. And then
Mm,
if you're hearing those two words together, you're with somebody, and either
mhm,
that's a really good piece of news, and I'm going to be blunt now, or it's a terrible piece of news. You
mhm.
know, and I'm not trying to be difficult or be controversial, but I
Yeah.
think a lot of times people have babies they weren't planning to have, and that
Mm,
adds a change to your entire life. So I actually had to quit my job with nonprofit because my ex-wife was wanting to stop working, so I needed a
mhm,
better paying job, and I got into advertising because that
mhm.
was also a background of mine.
Yeah.
But what I was doing in advertising allowed me to still do school talks because in
Mm,
1985, and this is answering your question now, in 1985 I got an opportunity to be one of the only Canadian keynote speakers for the first ever Canadian Student Leadership Convention held in my hometown of Yorkton, Saskatchewan, of all places. And
wow.
there were over 900 students and teacher advisors there from all over North America. As
Mhm.
soon as that event was over, I had over 125 requests to speak at schools.
Wow.
So I was able to manage my advertising job along with my boss's support. And I would do school talks on like Mondays or Fridays or whatever. Maybe I'd travel and do a couple of days. But eventually it led me down the road to where I thought, I can't do this anymore. So I got a divorce. That's a whole other
Mhm.
story. And I
Yeah.
became a single dad, and I
Mhm.
quit my job, and I decided to become a professional speaker full time. So I went into student leadership. I started doing schools, an average of 200 a year. And that
Mhm.
led me into a lot of experience as a speaker. So I
Mhm.
would relate that as being the highlight, because if I
Wow.
hadn't had 1985's talk come along, I truly don't think that I would be speaking today.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. There's always in life the unexpected moment that later on sort of changed the path of our kind of trajectory and whatnot. And sounds like you are very well aware of that event there. And yeah, wonderful. So, Alvin, as you, we're going to bounce around a bit in terms of timelines. So, as we sort of look at the current day's things here, I think you talk about gearing up for some events soon. Some of it are virtual. Do you have any in-person events that are maybe smaller kind of numbers that are on the schedule anytime yet?
No, my calendar completely cleared out. And
Yes.
unfortunately, that's the reality. But again, I think the most important thing to do, this is going to sound pretty contrived considering the conversation we're having today, but I
Mm-hmm.
had to listen to my own words. I
Mm-hmm.
had to change my focus. I had to change my way of looking at things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on, through my agent in Texas, Darren Powell. I'm with Powell Speakers. Just a little, so people understand that I've got an agent that represents me. He's also frustrated because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of these events are over, like 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 people. I do big events, doing a lot of the time, and
Mm-hmm.
they're mostly associations. I do some corporate work in terms of companies, but the bulk of what I do are professional associations. So the
Mm-hmm.
reason they've been canceling is because they simply cannot meet in a room. And
Yeah.
some of them have gone virtual. So I've got 4 on my calendar coming up that are virtual that were eventually converted, but I've also lost dozens of live
Mm-hmm.
events. They've been put off into 2021. And the problem, Dune, is that I work in the United States about 75% of the time. So that's another issue, that I
Yeah.
can't cross the border unless it's essential service. And then
Yeah.
another ironic thing happened that had nothing to do with this conversation, but I may as well tell you. Talk about frustrating. My passport expired in May,
Hmm.
but I can't get a new one because they're not taking new passport,
Oh,
or
really?
renewals. Well, only emergencies. So
Oh,
since I
wow.
don't have any emergencies to go to the States because all those bookings have been put off, I'll
Yeah.
get one eventually. But the other thing is, I've got a visa in my
Yeah.
passport to work in the
Mm-hmm.
United States. So I can't just send it in mail. I don't want to do that. I want to do it in person because I got to keep that visa. Anyway, I'm getting off the topic. The point is that I've had to learn to adapt, just like we all have. And
Yeah.
nobody loves change. But
Yeah.
I would ask your audience to consider the fact that, did you think any time in your life you'd ever have to go through it without changing? It actually
Mm.
can be a really good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this definitely is tough time for most of us, and for virtually everybody who, in some different ways, and speakers and entertainers and musicians are particularly impacted by this particular pandemic here. So Alvin, I'm going to take us back a little bit further. And when did you move to Calgary? Like, how was it the Alberta calling, or what was it that
It
made
was
you
my
left?
wife. It was a promise I made to Darlene, my wife.
Hmm.
So when we met, I want you to picture that I met Darlene when she was at the end of her own marriage, a short-term marriage, mind you, and she was
Hmm.
trying to consider what her future was going to be. We
Hmm.
crossed paths at a convention that I was speaking at, and she was the co-chair of. So we actually had a professional relationship, and we hit it off. So we
Hmm.
started seeing each other after her marriage ended, and we gave her some time off to get her mindset right. And then we were distant in a relationship. So lots of time on the phone before the internet and Skype and all that. But I made her move to Regina because that's where my son and I were living, and we were sharing the parenting with my ex-wife. And
Hmm.
she volunteered to move to Regina from Calgary. I
Hmm.
think she got an awful lot of funny looks for that because nobody goes to Regina on purpose. But she was following a guy, and I promised her that I wouldn't make her stay in Regina for the rest of her life. And that's not a disparaging comment on Saskatchewan because I love Saskatchewan. But
Hmm.
she was from Edmonton, and she had a big family. So
Yeah.
in 2000, it was the time for my son to transpose from junior high into high school. And we thought it'd be a good time for him to make that change by moving to Calgary. My son moved when he was 8. That's a whole other long, bad story. And essentially, it was time to go back to Alberta. But I will tell you this, that it was the best thing I ever did. And I'm going to do a plug now, Dune. I can't avoid it
Eh?
because in those days, Saskatchewan did not have a chapter of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers.
Hmm.
So one of the first things we did when we moved to Calgary was join CAPS, and it literally changed my life. I know you hear that a lot. If you're in the association, it sounds really nice. But the
Yeah.
reality was, we never looked at the potential of what I could be. So I went from being kind of a little bitty Canadian speaker into getting all over the world. I've been to 5 continents. And of course, bragging now, I got my certification in 2009, and I was inducted into the hall in 2013. So it's
Yeah.
really been something special for me to see how far I could take not only my professional career, but what I learned along the way. I've learned a ton of things too, Dune. This isn't just me teaching, it's learning. And I think we
Yeah.
all need to learn every single day.
You bet. Yeah. That's the, we, uh, I think I met you about 10 years ago when I joined CAPS. And every year we go to, our national convention where lots of learning, lots of sharing, lots of hugging.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's great. I have a photo that I'm going to bring up. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share a photo that I see here just on Facebook from of Darlene and one of your pets, one of your dogs. So let me see if I can bring that in here quickly.
Sure.
It will surprise you. We haven't planned this, but I'm going to go ahead and bring this photo in here.
Hey,
And
I'm glad you're doing it because I don't have the technology at this end right now.
yeah, do you see this photo, my friend?
Oh yeah. Oh boy. You know what? That's our previous dog. That was Raymond, and that
Hmm.
is Darlene for sure. What's really
Hmm.
funny is Darlene hasn't had her hair cut since March, so you
Mm.
should see it now. That
Yeah,
dog, unfortunately, we lost 4 years ago.
yeah,
He was a special 3 years ago.
yeah.
Sorry, he was a special new one now. And guess what his name is? Our new dog's name
Hmm.
is Murphy. And it never occurred to us
Murphy.
that our last name is Law. So when we got his dog tags made, it said Murphy Law. The people at the store thought that was funny. And we were kind of looking at each other going, oh, never thought about that. So yeah, we're real pet lovers. And all of our dogs, Dune, have been rescue dogs.
Hmm. Nice,
That's
nice,
a great
nice.
picture. Thank you for showing that.
Yeah, yeah, that is a great picture. So tell us, in Calgary, and you plug into the CAPS Association, and tell us about your kind of take on Calgary. Any sort of tidbits to share in all the years you spent in Calgary?
Well, the first thing that I felt was a very different Calgary. When I moved in 2000, we had lived in Regina I'd been there for 17 years. But I also went and to college in Calgary in 2078 to 80. So
Mm,
Calgary would have been what? maybe 400,000 or 500,000 people back in those days. It was a
Yep.
very different kind of community. And to be quite frank, when I moved to Calgary in 2000, I noticed the size and the
Mm.
scope of how it's changed. But what I also noticed was, and by the way, it's a lovely city. We love living there. But it also had a very different kind of a personality to it. It almost seemed like it was having some negative energy running around. And I think my take on that was the idea of so many people being transient,
Mm.
moving to Calgary for work, especially in the oil business. And the people that moved to Calgary were working 12, 15-hour days. And I think it was hard for them to appreciate and enjoy Calgary. So
Yeah.
I think that's what I felt. And I've noticed it even more, with now the oil prices being so low, that there just seems to be a bit of a funk, kind
Mm.
of a negative vibe that goes around Calgary because people are so dependent on the income from the oil business. But you
Mhm.
know what I noticed also? This is going to sound a bit strange.
Mm.
In March and in April, and then even into May, there seemed to be an awful good vibe. And
Mm.
I think it's because of the lockdown and people having to spend time with each other, having to spend more conscious time of being separated, the distancing, all that stuff. But the manners, I just noticed manners coming out again,
Mm.
pleasant attitude, a kind of a good feel, a good vibe. And then, unfortunately, not to really bring this up and discuss it, and the George Floyd murder happened. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, all of that goodwill seemed to disappear in a day because all of a sudden everybody was mad again. And I get it. You
Mm.
know what? I don't like any of this injustice. But the reality is that we cannot let these negative things that happen in our society drag us down into feeling like we have no control, that we have no choice, and that we cannot better ourselves. I think that's the point. Is we need to take advantage of these times to make ourselves not only better personally and professionally, but to remember that we're all in this together.
You,
Everybody, all of
you,
us.
you bet. You
We're
bet.
not alone.
I mean, uh, injustice, more injustice doesn't erase other injustice. If we're going to really address injustice, one of our biggest contribution that we can make is to be kind to one another, right?
Yeah, and I think we hear all these buzzwords. I think your audience will be familiar with them. Mindfulness
Hmm.
and consciousness, and all these sort of people call them new age phrases.
Hmm.
I don't think they're new age, dude. I think they're really, really, really old. I think
Hmm.
we've kind of adapted them to this idea. But my wife is also a feng shui master, and she
Hmm.
also understands the power of our energy. Hey,
Hmm.
Dune, you ever get around someone, you're around it for 30 seconds, it was 25 seconds too long because they're
Hmm.
just a negative person? All they're
Yeah.
doing is complaining about how terrible the world is. Yeah,
Yeah.
the world is terrible, but the world is also awesome. So it
Hmm.
really is how you approach it, isn't it? That's what
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think.
It's just like back to your radio days, you don't tune into the radio stations that you hate. If you want a good life, you tune into the radio stations that you love, right? Lots of
Well,
radio
and Dune, that's
stations.
a really good point because what I was doing in those days was think about it. I was playing the song track or the soundtrack of people's lives, right?
Hmm.
I was playing their favorite music. I was telling stories. I was
Yep.
popular and they didn't even know me because I was providing something that made them feel good. And you and I know how much music means to us. And I think that's where it really did, going all the way back to when I was a musician full time, that it changed my life, man. It gave me a whole different energy, a love
Yep.
for life energy, and more
Yep.
than anything, an appreciation that I was given a talent that I could take advantage of. But here's a question for your audience.
Hmm.
How many of you have decided to take up playing something that you quit playing when you were young, or decided to learn to play the guitar, or take fiddle lessons, or buy a harmonica? We're all socially isolated right now. Isn't it a good time to do something to make yourself smile, whatever
Hmm.
that looks like?
Yeah.
And for me, it's always been music.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's never too late. It's never too late, and also it's never too early. So now is the most important time of the whole timeline. So now, how are you going to spend your time now during COVID, and not waiting till it's done or whatever? How are you spending your time now, right, friends? So. Thank you, Alvin, for those thoughts. We have some great viewers chiming in here along the way as well here. You might have seen that before where Sue Styles, our friend Sue Styles, chimed in there. She says she love you, my friend. You are well loved, both in certainly our CAPS community and, as you said, quite a sort of a famous personality back in Saskatchewan and now globally quite well recognized. And so obviously that was built over decades and decades of not only professional work, but really personal development. Tell me one of your biggest lessons that you've learned from having no arms, my friend. What was one of the biggest lessons? I can kind of imagine, but I'd love to hear from you. I think your video is cutting out there. And so what I would do, Alvin, is if you could come back in again, that would be great, Alvin. I'm going to have you come back in here. There you go. Marilyn chimed in again here. Dune's online jam is the best every Thursday. Cool. We're referring to the Uptown Blues Jam, where the host with the most, Tony Rufo, and I on every Thursday. Cool. Well, thank you for Marilyn for your encouragement there. Now, Alvin's going to come right back on his iPad that is tethered to his phone because the internet is literally out for him and his surrounding neighbors in around the area there in, I guess, at a cottage in Saskatchewan. So he'll come back in. But while he's doing that, let me perhaps play the next video for you. There's a video on Alvin's site that I want to perhaps share with you. And, this might be a good time for me to share it. Why don't I go ahead and do that while we're waiting for Alvin to join us here again on the Internet of Things. So let me just kind of feature that and make sure that we can play that here. Wow.
Hey, Dune, I'm back.
You are back. You are definitely back.
Yeah, we're actually, my wife actually, Darlene, was just in the room. And Murphy, come here. Come here. Come here. Up.
There you go. Here's
Here's Murphy.
Murphy Law,
Yeah.
everybody.
Come here,
Murphy
up.
Law
Come
is coming
here.
into the picture here.
Come here. Up. Come here. Up. Here he is. Come here, Murph. Come over here. No, he's shy now. Anyway, Darlene just came in and said even her phone is having an issue. She actually saw a Sasktel truck when she walked the dog this morning, so we're guessing that there may be bigger issues happening today. So my apologies to your audience for dropping out like that. But that's the other problem with the new technology and the new virtual talks, right? Is
Yeah.
you cannot predict when you're going to have a drop, even in the city. I had issues when I was back in Calgary, so
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
one thing that I don't like. But what are you going to do? And I
Yeah.
think you and I talked about this as well. Maybe it'll help your audience to understand. I don't use a desktop computer for the very simple reason that I need to be able to use my toes on the keypad. And
Mhm.
even though you can put a wireless keyboard on the floor, when I discovered the iPad, it changed everything about my relationship with technology. And it
Mhm.
just simply is my favorite platform. In
You
fact,
bet.
just a quick story, and I'm not dropping names now, but I got to know Steve Wozniak, who, of
Mm.
course, is very famous for being partners with another Steve that created the product that I'm using today.
You bet.
Way back when, him and I were speaking at an event in Singapore. And when he met me, I was in the green room using my iPad, and he literally came over, introduced himself, asked if he could take a photo, and then said, "Would you mind if I take some video?" I said, "No." He says, "I'm not going to do anything weird with it, but I want to send it back," in his words, "to the nerds at the Geek Lab in Palo Alto to see somebody using one of our platforms in a way I've never seen, using his feet." So that was pretty cool. And I ended up getting to know him and I've kept in touch. The point is that I think I know that I could do better with technology, but I am limited by how I use my feet. And it's not an excuse. It's just the truth, the reality of how I function. Yeah, there he is. Look at it. He's about the nicest, most unassuming rich guy I've ever met in my entire life. He's just a regular dude. I told him when he spoke that day, he looked like he was dressed to go bowling. Seriously.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very cool. Very
And
cool.
by the way, if I may add one more thing, he didn't have an awful lot of positive things to say about Mister Gate. Who was Steve Jobs, the guy who was a bit of a jerk. Anyway, we'll leave that one there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's all different perspectives on life and people, and life is so multi-dimensional, isn't it?
Well, and I think that's the point is that, when we talk about all of this, especially what we're going through right now with yet another round of protests about racial intolerance. Look, I understand that. I think the problem is that and I'm going to say something that's going to be a little less Alvin than what people would expect. I do not think we will ever get over this.
Hmm.
I think we just live in a human world where some people get it and some people will never learn it. It's
Hmm.
unfortunate, but I see it. Let me give you an example, Doom, that's very specific about being me.
Hmm.
I actually like this body.
Hmm.
It's like a natural filter. And I know that sounds a bit crude, but the reality is that people that are comfortable getting to know me are usually really, really good people. And
Hmm.
just a real quick anecdote. I know we're running short of time here, but this is one of my favorite stories. My wife and I were working in Hawaii, and that was a pretty nice gig. I was actually doing some work for YPO and YEO, which are organizations for CEOs. And we were able to stay at a nice hotel. We're on the beach. It's quite crowded down there. But of course, when I take off my shirt, it's a bit revealing. You saw the photo of me at the beginning of the What's Your Label video where I'm eating a hamburger with my shirt off. You know
Hmm.
how long it took me to gain confidence to go to a beach and take my shirt off? It took
Hmm.
a long time. So we're sitting there and we were squished next to a couple of bodybuilders. You can't make stories like this up. A male and a female. And they were obviously a couple. And they were dressed very scantily. And they were showing off their bodies, tattoos and all. And by the way, I don't have a dislike for tattoos at all.
Hmm.
But I was right next to the woman who about 10 minutes after Darlene and I sat down and started to relax, all of a sudden they packed up their stuff and left. And I didn't think anything about it. But the next morning, I had gone down to the concierge to ask about where to go for dinner that night in Honolulu. And I noticed that this couple were having an argument at the front doors of the hotel. She had a roller bag, was dressed in travel clothes, and he was dressed in shorts and a t-shirt. And they weren't getting along. And as the moment ended, she left. She got in a taxi and took off. And the guy spun and he looked real upset. And as he's walking past, he stops and he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, dude, are you the guy that was on the beach yesterday that we sat next to?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't really recognize you. Sorry, there's a lot of people here in Honolulu." He goes, "No, I'm sure it was you. I have to tell you something. I got an apology and a thank you." I said, "Really? For what?" He goes, "Apology first. You may not know this then if you didn't notice us, but we ended up having a big argument because she didn't feel comfortable being so close to you on the beach. She felt very uncomfortable with your body." And we were talking about this. And he goes, "Dude, I got to tell you," and this is the way he talked. I'm not making it up. He says, "We were here on what I called an exploration vacation because we were thinking of maybe getting married, but we've never actually gone away together. So some people say you got to go away together to find out what you're like together. Well, I got to tell you, man, here's the thank you. We argued all night, and it made me realize how truly shallow she is. And it really taught me something about myself, that I obviously work hard on my body, but maybe I need to work harder on my attitude, because obviously you've got the kind that I admire." That really was a conversation in a hotel lobby in Honolulu. My point is this: not everybody's comfortable with me, and that's okay. Not everybody's comfortable with a Black person. Not everybody's comfortable with a Korean person. Not everybody's comfortable with a First Nations person. That's just the way it is. You try to convert them, but if they're unwilling to learn, that's the way it is. And I hate to be a downer, but I think that's the trouble with all of this that's going on, is we will never have it right, because we'll always have a significant number of people that will never understand that we're all human inside, all of us.
Right, right. Absolutely. So in other words, the humanity of our own shortcomings, if you will, as a species, is not going to disappear overnight or anytime soon. In other words, we'll just have to find ways to certainly progress and move on, but don't fool ourselves for a moment that we can control the thoughts that goes into somebody's head, whether what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with. Those are challenges that each person have to deal with themselves, I think.
So, Dune, let me turn this back on you for a second, my friend. When you moved to Canada, how old were you?
I was 13.
And how did you feel?
You know, it's funny because part of the lessons I've learned is that how we feel is influenced a lot about how we see the world. Because I was such a positive I had such a positive mindset that I'll tell you a story. I think it was at my 20th high school reunion. One of my friends who I've not seen for a long time, she moved to the States, and she was there, and she said, "Hey, Dune," and with a very caring voice, she asked me, "How did we treat you when you came over?" And I thought about, how did we treat you when you came over? And I thought about it, and I said, I think you guys treated me well. And a big part of that, though, I think is we see the world the way we are. And so when I was, kind of positive and perhaps naive in my thinking, I saw all of the exciting stuff. I saw all of the positive things and chose not to dwell on the negative things. So in large, I love Westlock, Alberta, a small town of 5,000 people. I was there for 7 years, came there, 2 hours later, I was in school, and the whole full immersion was really good for me. And so that was my answer to her, was that I think I was treated well, and but I also acknowledged that if there was any kind of whether it's racism, whether it's bullying of the new kid that just came in, I took those in strides. There was one instance that I remember of the person who did that sort of resonated and stood out. But that was such a small drop in a big ocean of positivity that it didn't really bother me. But I ran into him at Nate many years after, and he said, sorry if I acted kind of badly towards you when you were new to Canada. And the fact is, a large part of how we perceive the world is reality for us, right?
Well, here's a bit of a bait question. Did you
Mm-hmm.
consider yourself different?
You know, in many ways, no. I was young and silly enough to think that this full immersion is going to be easy and full immersion, and so because of that, many of my friends would say that I'm more Canadian than some Canadians. But
Well,
I must tell you one phenomenon that I shared with my other guests a day or two ago. I said, when I first came over, you guys all spoke so fast and you all look the same to me.
exactly. So here, that reason I brought that up is because this goes all the way back to the first video. What is differences?
Hmm.
When it comes right down to it, and I know this sounds very sweet and warm and fuzzy, blah, blah, blah. I was born completely normal, Dune.
Hmm.
But here's the key, and I'm glad we got back live because I wanted to say this before we ended this session. When I talked at the beginning about my greatest gift was being born without arms, I mean it. Because not only was I born without arms, but the family that gave me up at 5 days of age. I've had people say that's terrible. No, it's not. It's awesome. Why would I want to grow up in a home where they would even give a second thought as to whether they wanted me or not?
Hmm.
So mom and dad, Jack and Hilda Law, when they took me in, it was a foster home. They didn't adopt me. They weren't looking to start a family. They were 55 and 53 years old, mom and dad.
Hmm.
But they took me in because that was mom's thing, taking care of foster kids. And once I came to live there, then that ended. They closed the foster home and I
Hmm.
stayed. But the point
Hmm.
is, they didn't take me just because of sympathy. They took me at first because that was their job. But then,
Hmm.
second, they got to know me. And they realized, especially mom, that I was identical to the two previous boys that she had almost by herself raised. Because
Hmm.
let's remember, my brothers were born in 1932 and 1936.
Hmm.
That's a long time ago. And men did not participate in child rearing. That's just the way it was. Can you believe that now? I
Hmm.
mean, that's the whole point of things have changed. Of course they have, thank God, but they will never be as good as they can be because we'll always have that negative element. My birth family were fine people. I got a chance to meet them in 1993. I didn't meet my birth father because he passed away many, many years ago. I met my birth mother, Sophie, who died last summer at 91 years old.
Hmm.
Sophie would be the polar opposite of Hilda Law in terms of personality. So where Hilda Law, as you saw in the video at the beginning, pushed me, Sophie would have taken care of me. I would have never been independent. She would have felt guilty for having taken those pills that made me like I am. So isn't that interesting? Because Hilda Law had no guilt. Therefore, she was not embarrassed. Therefore, she had nothing to be uncomfortable with or negative about. She did her job. And I like to call my mom my first CEO, right? She created an environment in our home that made me the person that I am to this day. In fact, when I met Darlene, you saw the pictures of her. The first thing I thought was, oh my God, she's gorgeous. In fact, apparently when I met her, I was drooling. I deny that to this day, but that's what she said. But the thing is, why would she be attracted to me? I don't think it was the biceps. As Darlene put it, it was your complete confidence in yourself, and you were so comfortable in your own skin, and you made people around you feel better about who they were. Well,
Hmm.
that's what I do. I don't do it it's not contrived. It's who I am. It's what I remember. You talk about going to college or high school reunions. It's
Hmm.
fascinating when I meet people I've known for 30, 40 years, and they would always say, Alvin, you were always like this. You just made people feel better about who they were just by being in the room.
Hmm.
Well, I guess I was pretty lucky then, wasn't I, to have that personality. And
Yeah.
I am to this day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think many of us, again, there's two messages that I want to bring out. One is your mindset has a huge influence over your life experiences, and your mindset also has a huge influence over other people's lives, the lives of other people. So we have an impact on others just by the way we think, just by the way we perceive the world, just by the way we process reality, I guess. So be very careful with what you do with your mindset, and nurture it like the powerful thing that it is, right?
So I've got a formula.
Hmm.
Apparently, I've been using this for a really long time. I
Hmm.
didn't realize it. I was working in England. I work in England a lot. and I was working with some CEO mastermind groups. They're little tiny people in America or Canada know them as Vistage or Tech. In England, they were a different organization. They've now been bought by Vistage, just to be technically correct.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all CEOs. They have little groups between 10 and 20 people. And I have traveled over there to speak to them for several years. And last year, 2 years ago, pardon me, I was working there and I met a guy and he said, "You're using ERO." I said, "What's ERO?" He says, "It's mentioned in the book by Jack Canfield in Success Principles." And I've never even read that book, although I have a signed copy, which is really strange. Anyway, the fact of the matter is, I met Jack Canfield in Halifax. I don't know if you were there, Dune.
Yes, I was. Yeah.
Yeah. I met him at that convention because he had made a reference, brought Darlene up on stage. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he made a comment about me. It was kind of an oops moment, if you remember. And I went backstage to make sure he knew that I was not offended by what he said.
Mm-hmm.
And we started chatting. And he gave me the copy of the book that he had on stage and signed it. I haven't read it. Why? I don't know why. I have no reason to understand why I haven't read that. Anyway, ERO is this. E stands for event. R stands for response or reaction. And O stands for outcome. So what I did was added my own spin to it. So E and then plus or minus R equals O. Plus or minus speaks for itself. You either have a positive or a negative response to an event. It doesn't change the event, but it changes the outcome based on your approach to it. Isn't that cool? So if every time we look at something, and I'm not talking about a happy person response, I'm talking about positive energy. So let's take the COVID thing. We can't do anything about it. So we can sit and stew and complain and whine, or we can accept it and take the positive out of the negative. I know that sounds contrived and very motivational speaker-ish. But the fact is, that's the kind of home that I grew up in, right? My dad would always say, "Alvin, you can't go back." This is going to sound crude. I apologize. "You can't go back in the womb and grow your arms. This is the way you're going to be for the rest of your life. So you better accept it, son, because it's never going to change. The only thing you can change is your attitude."
Wonderful. Hey, I'm hoping that you can change one thing for me. May I ask that we change the end time of this broadcast to be a little bit longer, my friend?
Oh, yeah, I'm fine. In fact, I apologize for the technical glitches, but we seem to have come back to a pretty good stream here. So, no, I'm good. In fact, I'm enjoying the idea that I'm connecting with people all over that are watching you and friends of yours on Facebook, and this is a pleasure. And by the way, one more thing, Dune, I want to tell you, thank you for doing these, all of these. I watched some of your other interviews. I think they're an extremely perfect example. That's two adjectives in one sentence of creating a positive energy flow for the internet that is lacking positive energy flow. Social media has become terrible in some respects, hasn't it?
Yeah. As I always say, powerful tools are, very useful, very beneficial, but they can be dangerous. So social media is therefore very powerful, but it also means when used incorrectly, just like, power tools, if you don't understand that power tools can be dangerous, just watch an episode of the Tim the Toolman Taylor.
I know. Exactly.
You will know that, misuse of a powerful tool can be very harmful. So it doesn't mean we shouldn't use power tools. It just means we have to be respectful and mindful of what we use it for and how we go about using it. And so thank you for extending the time, my friend. I'm going to pause. I'm going to say, when you said, when I asked, "Hey, Alvin, would you like to come on and chat for an hour and a bit?" When you said yes, was there a story that you wanted to share that we haven't gotten to yet? I'm just going to hand over the steering wheel to you, my friend. You can share a story. You can share a sentiment, an insight, anything at all. This is your drum solo here, or I suppose, that trombone solo here, my friend. The spotlight's on you. Take us somewhere.
So I appreciate the opportunity to tell a story. And I think what this story is going to be is a direct response to the unasked question, which, by the way, if I can add, and this is not self-promoting, but I'm one of very few people that Goalcast has done 2 videos on. So the one video you saw at the beginning is called "What's Your Label?" It's got 40 million views on Facebook. But there's another one that isn't on my website, but you can find, called How Do You Go to the Bathroom? Good one, huh? Look it up on YouTube. It's not as long. It is not as good, in my opinion, as the What's Your Label video, but it addresses the question that I think is on everybody's mind when they meet Alvin Law. And the first time I heard that question was in a music room in Regina, Saskatchewan, where I was representing my radio station doing a career day, and I was there to talk about the broadcasting industry. And I was doing my best old radio voice, and I had my Rock 92 jacket on and handing out Rock 92 stickers to all my fans. And I asked if they had any questions, and every kid in the room put their hand up, and the kid in the front row stood up and said, "How do you go to the bathroom?" That's a funny story, isn't it? But it's an uncomfortable thing to think about. So my point is this. Not only is this a great example to give your audience on perspective, but it's another example of something even bigger. I truly mean this. When this call is over, when this Facebook Live event is over, I'm going to challenge your watchers and followers. Go to the washroom and do not use your hands. I dare you. Now, people right now are thinking, that's just goofy. No, it's not goofy. And then you're going to say, well, that's impossible. No, it's not impossible. I had to learn to do that. I want your audience to gain not only perspective today in my eyes and in my voice, but in their own lives. Because, and I'm not blaming anybody, I'm not accusing anybody, but one of the things that I believe human beings need to have is more gratitude. Because gratitude makes you appreciate what you have versus going out to a store and buying something that is supposed to make you happy. Look, I like stuff, I like nice things, but the reality is, when they say money can't buy happiness, there's a lot in that sentence. Like, again, trips are nice, vacations, expensive cars, whatever. They all matter. But what we need to realize is we're very, very fortunate. Now, I'm not suggesting in every possible way. So if you're out there and you've lost your job because of COVID, or if things aren't going well, I apologize if I'm offending you. But the reality is, I want you to go to the bathroom and not use your hands, because I want you to think about what you'd have to do next. You'd have to get help. Dune, in my opinion, one of the greatest character flaws that human beings own is our ego. And our ego gets us in trouble. And it's why social media is such a dangerous minefield, because we all want to be right, correct? Everybody wants to be right.
Yeah.
I want to be right. You want to be right. We want to be on the right side. But then we see things on the internet that we disagree with, so we get into a virtual peeing competition. And nothing ends well when you get into a virtual peeing competition, because peeing competitions never do anything anyway. They are the source of a problem in our ego mind. So what I'm suggesting is, by having gratitude, that is followed quickly by humility. And if people were a little more humble, that would be a great thing. But more than anything, we need to learn, and this is huge, that it's okay to ask for help. Can you imagine when I went to college, I couldn't even go to the bathroom myself? I couldn't do my pants because I didn't own clothes like I do now. I had to get strangers to help me undo my top button and my zipper. Now, I won't make your audience go through the visuals of how I actually go to the bathroom, but I will just simply say that I use a lot of yoga to be able to be flexible enough to take care of my sanitary needs. But the reality is the clothing. Finally, they came out. Remember this, anybody? How old are you? Rugby pants. Remember when rugby pants came out? Those elasticized beauties. And of course, I'm being silly now, but almost everybody that's over 75 must own clothing that has no buttons or zippers, because that's the part of aging, isn't it? Or maybe even younger. All of my clothes are like that, Dune. But now I get them professionally tailored. So they all have elastic waistbands, which means that I can pull them down and pull them up using my own techniques. That's the answer specifically to your audience wondering, how do you do this, Alvin? But the reality of that story is not about the physical element of going to the bathroom. It's about the human element of accepting that we're all flawed, that we've all got something that we don't do well, or something that we've had a hard time accepting. And that's what's called human growth. And frankly, that's what shows like yours do. They give people an opportunity to grow themselves as a human being.
Thank you. Is this the clip you're referring to, my
Oh
friend?
yeah, you found it. There it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your audience should watch that sometime. It's about 3 minutes long, I think. It
Yeah.
hasn't had as many views, but it's pretty good.
Hey, I would love to play it now if you're good with it.
Go ahead.
Okay, so here we go. If that is the correct one, let me just prep it here, my friend. And because it's on Facebook, I did not find a YouTube version of it. So here it is on Facebook. And let me just go ahead and play.
Sure.
Let's make sure that we can hear the audio. Can you hear the audio?
I can at my end.
Hold on. How about now?
In front of a bunch of junior. How do you go to the bathroom? Got up in front of a bunch of junior high 7th graders and was about to talk about the radio industry. And I said, boys and girls, if you have any questions.
Let me just do that one more time here.
Okay. How do you go to the bathroom? Got up in front of a bunch of junior high 7th graders and was about to talk about the radio industry. And I said, boys and girls, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put up your hands. Every kid in the audience shot their hands up, and I didn't know what to do. Never done a speech in my life. So I acknowledged a kid in the front row. He stood up and said, how do you go to the bathroom? Okay, that wasn't a broadcasting question. That was a really good question. And I dare you to get it out of your heads for the next 15 minutes. There was a school right across the street from our house in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, and I couldn't wait to go there. I just couldn't wait to go to that school. Principal just looks across his desk and says, hey folks, I'm sorry to tell you this, but he can't come here. So Mom says, well, he needs to go to school. Where's that going to happen? Oh, he needs to go across town to the school where crippled kids like him go. My mom looked at me and said, he's not crippled. The principal looked at my mom like there was something wrong with her too. Mrs. Law, he's got no arms. What do you call that? Mom went, Alvin. So the principal then says, this is the most important part of the story. He says, be that as it may, there's nothing I can do. Well, my mom started to cry. I just want to tell you that my mom taught me to use my feet, but I think the most important thing my mom did was allowed me to celebrate my difference. But I had a guidance counselor, and he said, Mr. Law, I think we know what your plan is. And I said, absolutely, sir. I'm going to be a rock star. And that was my plan. And I believed in it from the time that I was little, and I would tell everybody. He says, no, you're kind of ugly for television. But he said, you'd be great in radio. See, when that kid asked that question about going to the bathroom, I realized what I was actually doing, to be quite blunt about this. I was living in my own little cave in radio. Because society was not my favorite place, because people would stare and people would look funny. And you can imagine that happens to me all the time. But the fact of the matter is, it took me a special experience to absolutely understand how life actually works. That was the day that my son Vance was born. I was not prepared. I was kind of going through my mind of what this was going to be like. And when he was 11 minutes old, they put him here. He fit here. I was having a lot of thoughts about what I could do. Could I be a dad? Could I take care of a child without arms? But this is the one that got me. I was 25 years old, and in my lifetime, I'd never actually once thought about what it must have felt like for my mom to hold me for the first time. My birth family simply gave me up. My mom, Hilda Law, was a foster mom who took me in and absolutely changed my life. And then it occurred to me my mom was 55 years old. And I was homeless. But I think the most important thing my mom did was allowed me to celebrate my difference. To not mourn having no arms, but to learn a very important lesson of gratitude, and that is what we have is more important than what we don't. So it's not just about having a positive attitude, it's about the power of understanding that negativity is part of this too. But here's the most important thing I want to leave you with tonight. I did become a rock star. That is from the soundtrack of a music video that was shown at the opening ceremonies of the Rio Paralympic Games in 2016. This is representative of what the whole idea of how living the impossible means living what seemed impossible. Our dreams can come true, but we have to believe that it's possible. We need to believe more in this. We need to believe in ourselves more than anything. We need to say, yes, I can. How do you go to the back?
Wow. That was amazing.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You were up there for a minute. So
Yeah. I had myself on mute to make sure that I didn't disturb the video, but that was a fun video as well. That was great messages, and again, Alvin, because we're going to extend it a bit here, I have another question for you. If you're game for more questions coming your way.
you bet.
Okay, so tell us what you've learned about this professional speaking career that you've had for I'm guessing 40 years, over 40 years, and not only the Speakers Hall of Fame, but also into the Hall of Fame of disability. I forgot the exact name of that now, but 2 Hall of Fames and whatnot. In that journey, what have you learned about the thing that many people are afraid of, this thing called speaking, or public speaking in particular? Tell us a bit more about that, some insights around that.
I really believe that not only was I doing the right thing by going into broadcasting as a career, but here's a really interesting little reaction to what you just asked me. People would often say, when did you start speaking? And my answer, not to be a smart butt, is 1963. People go, you were 3 years old. I know. Well, how could you be speaking? I didn't say I was getting paid for it. But people would ask my mom, what happened to your little boy? And my mom would say things like, well, ask him. He's not an idiot. She was pretty blunt. And I started explaining it right from the very beginning of my memory. So I think that leads me to this conclusion, that you don't have to be a speaker, but you should definitely be a communicator. Not enough people study communications. You know, even taking a little course, maybe a Toastmasters club or some kind of online course that teaches you how to communicate your thoughts. And I know that not everybody's going to want to get up on stage and do that thing. But I honestly believe too, and this is, again, I appreciate the question, because the truth is, I think I am more of a performer than a speaker. That's where that music came into me. And yes, I will admit it, at least I can admit it, part of it's ego. There's no question about it. You cannot deny how much fun it is to get up on stage and perform and get a response. And I think that's why it's pretty hard to deal with what's going on right now and all the stages being taken away for us speakers. Because talking to this screen right now is not the same as being in front of 2,000 people and feeling their energy. And I think that's the hard part. But here is the best expression I ever learned as a speaker. It's not about me. Kind of counterintuitive, right? But it is. It's not about me. If I didn't show up that day, everything would be fine. So what I'm hoping to do with what I've learned in my career is not, again, to harp on this ego thing, but to remind myself that I am simply part of an industry that is doing its best to try to encourage people to do their best. And that's what I think I've fulfilled my reason for being. Because that's got to be the biggest question. We talked earlier about what are the 2 most powerful words. I'm pregnant. Well, you know what? There's other words too that are just as powerful. Why was I born? What am I doing here? What's my reason for being? What's my purpose? Those all go into very deep philosophical ideas. But they are, and this is going to sound a bit funny, they are the drawback of the human brain. All right. You didn't see Murphy live, but he was in here because he heard me talking and he wanted to come and see me. Murphy's life is dramatically different than the life of a human being, right? He's a dog. So he's not affected by things like we are. His ego doesn't enter into it. His life is all about security, right? Where's my next meal coming from? Am I going to get to go upstairs and go poop? Yes, Murphy, we'll take care of you that way. Pretty simple parameters, huh? Well, let's be silly for a second and imagine that that's pretty much human beings, right? We need to eat, we need to poop, we need to sleep, and we need to, more than anything, feel like we're meaning something to the world. And I hope that your audience has been feeling a little bit better about themselves since the lockdown instead of the opposite. Because I think we're starting to understand that we had taken our lives before this for granted. And we shouldn't do that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. You're so right. And I like to maybe just take a quick browse through kind of your website there. Tell us what people might find on alvinlaw.com if they were to go there. I'm just going to make it bigger so that we can
Sure. And,
kind of
and
show our viewers here.
by the way, it's interesting. People right now are probably looking at it going, boy, that's an old looking website. Yeah, it is actually. And I was getting it rebuilt. And then all of a sudden COVID hit and I decided to pull back on the investment for a little while. So I'm having to put up with my own frustration about my old website.
Yep.
But there's all kinds of things on there. What I would recommend if your audience wanted to is they can look up the videos. But there's also a great testimonial on there about what it is that I do for my clients.
Yep.
There's all kinds of pictures. There's stuff that you can look up for my blog. I've got some interesting writing. Sometimes my writing gets a little bit on the edge because I told you earlier, I don't see anything is accomplished by me being too warm and fuzzy. Sometimes we have to be very truthful. And of course, the bottom line is that there's some information there that people could share with others. So, it's pretty simple. I also like to remind people that it is the one place, and I'm going to do one cheap product placement here, okay? This is the only place you can buy Alvin's Laws of Life.
Oh, hold on.
It's not on Amazon. It's not in the bookstores. This is my best-selling Alvin's Laws of Life. And then the tagline, by the way, is 5 steps to successfully overcome anything.
Right.
And somebody asked me one time, so if you read your book, you can overcome anything? I went, no, if you read the book, you won't overcome anything. But if you do what I suggest in the book, then yes, you can.
Yes, you can. So there it is. I'm just gonna zoom in here so I can see, and there it is. And so there is PayPal, and
simple as that.
Yep. Yeah, and you just magically.
Why is it on? People have asked me why is it not on Amazon. That would be a question for my wife Darlene, who does all of the business management. But what I can tell you is, and I think a lot of your people watching this right now can relate to this, Amazon is a bit complicated. They don't really like you hanging around too long unless your book sells #1. And then you end up having a commitment to them that can be a bit awkward. So, and here's another thing that to me is quite fascinating. Most people don't realize that the world of authorship is not what it appears to be. So I like to tell people, I'm not an author. I'm a speaker with a book. Mm-hmm. And the book is essentially what I covered today, a lot of my stories, a lot of my tips. But the laws themselves are like my list. They're like how can I put it? They're like a working map of your life or a mission statement. Companies have mission statements. I would encourage your audience to think about its own. What would you do if you wanted to write your own mission statement for your life? And if you wanted to take advantage of what I did, I wrote my name, Alvin, A-L-V-I-N. So the 5 laws are attitude, learning, valuing your life and spirit, imagination, and never giving up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I love that photo. Which lake was that? Was that in Saskatchewan or Alberta, my friend?
That's the same lake that you cannot see behind me because there's a wall. But I was actually at a friend's cottage when that photo was taken. We did not have our cottage yet. And a lot of people say, why don't you get a new photo for the book? I'll put a new photo on my new book, which I'm currently working on, although it's not coming as quickly as I thought it would. But definitely the book has been successful. And I will simply tell you this, that it is my life story, really, but it only goes to 1978 because it really talks an awful lot about the idea of how I grew to be the person that I became. And that's a dear friend of mine, Paul Brider, who lives in England, and I did some work for.
Hi, my name is...
Yeah. Let me hit play here.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Paul Bridle, Chief Executive Officer of the Exton Squared Group of Companies. I've known Alvin for a number of years. And 5 years ago, when I took over a company that was in pretty bad shape, the staff were disaffected, people were unhappy, they'd been pretty badly treated, and I needed to make significant change in the business. I invited Alvin to come along and be our opening speaker at the conference. Alvin does what Alvin does so well. He tells his life story in an amusing way, but also in a heart-wrenching way, when you realize just how much he's had to go through in his life, and yet he's still fun and he still has a smile on his face. I was able to get up after Alvin's presentation and say to people, if we want to change, we can change. It's only us who limits us. If we want to achieve, we can achieve. And we're only going to achieve if we're prepared to do things differently. By far the majority of people bought in immediately. There became an expression afterwards that was Alvin can. And every time somebody said, oh, we can't do that, or that's not possible, somebody would say, well, Alvin can. And everybody would laugh and then put their minds to solving the problem instead of excusing it. I can honestly say that Alvin had a great impact on what I was trying to do at the time. He took the time to understand what I was trying to achieve, and he just went out there and was Alvin. And we loved him, we cried with him, but we absolutely were inspired by him. I highly recommend, a great man and somebody I'm proud to call a friend.
Wonderful, wonderful. Tell us, my friend, as
he speaks well, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. Yeah. As you think about again your journey, I love to hear maybe a key insight that came out of again you speaking. You go to all over the world, speaking to European countries and a lot in the U.S. and whatnot. Tell us your observation about people. Are people the same? Are people different? Are people what's your top of mind as you think about all the people that you come in contact with? Share with us a bit of a sentiment about your people observation, my friend.
Yeah, and I think, Dune, this would be a great way to kind of wrap this around to the end, because I could talk for hours, but we've both got our other lives to do as well. But I think that's a great question to finish off with. To be quite blunt with you, I think that's part of what I have been fascinated with, that why are people so uncomfortable with others' differences? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I can tell you how it presented itself to me. The idea was very simple. That kid that asked the question, how do you go to the bathroom? We're getting a bit of flashing going on here. I don't know if that's you or me or what's going on with the screen. But I think what's interesting is that the first time that I started speaking in schools, I noticed them doing something when they were little 5-year-olds, little 6-year-olds. Not every one of them every single time, but every single time, at least 2 or 3 in the front row would pull their arms inside their shirts and look up at the stage and wiggle their arms like this. And it was pretty funny to watch them do that, right? But the reality was that it could have been offensive, but I wasn't offended because I have a sense of humor. But then the reality also happened that, hey, maybe that's just a Saskatchewan thing, because I was working in Saskatchewan. And then I thought it was a Canadian thing. And then I thought it was like a North American thing. And the more that I traveled outside of North America, and I don't always speak to schools, but in these cases I often did. But then I went to Uganda. And I was there, and I wasn't speaking at a school, but I ended up going to this place where we were having a Rotary event. I was the keynote speaker for an international event in Kampala. And we had gone out to open a birthing hospital, and there were 200 women and children under a tent to be there for the photo op. So when all the celebrities left, I went and talked to the audience a little bit without a microphone, and just because I noticed they were curious about me. Well, I didn't see this coming. About 2-3 minutes into my little talk, 5 or 6 of the little Ugandan kids, who were black, of course, had pulled their arms inside their shirts, and they were doing the same thing. And then it occurred to me, and this was my processing of this information. If kids all over planet Earth react to me the same way every single time, pulling their arms inside their shirts and looking up at me, then aren't we all just human beings? Not black, not white, not brown, not Russian or American or Korean or Canadian. Hey, we need to be proud of ourselves, but our identity needs to be pinned together. And if there has ever been a time to prove that, it's ironically been COVID. Because nobody is immune. It's a human condition. So if we can appreciate we're all living the human condition every single day, I think we'd have a lot more respect for each other.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And with this, I like to wrap it up. As you mentioned, you got things to get to, and I'm going to play the same clip here at the sort of the outro here. But before
Sure.
I do that, again, thank you, Alvin, for taking the time and for jumping through the hoops in terms of technology. Our guests who have tuned in just recently here might not have heard that, in fact, you are on here on an iPad tethered to or Bluetooth connected to your phone, your iPhone or whatever have you. And that phone is just, you're just using your phone data line because your internet has been out all morning and afternoon here as well. And so, we do what it takes to get to our audiences, right?
And actually, to be quite frank, when I was talking to you about 5 minutes ago, I got a text from my service provider telling me I was almost at my max for my data plan for the month. So I used a lot of it today. So that's another reason I'm kind of thinking I should get going, because I don't know if it's going to turn itself off or not, but I definitely don't want to be having to face that reality. But let me just say one more thing, Dune, before I say goodbye. This video, I think, is a very good example, and I know you played it once before, but it's a good example of the fact that I'm not the only one out there being amazing. Mm-hmm. I think we can all be amazing. But if I may add one more personal point, this soundtrack for this video was recorded in May of 2016 at Abbey Road Studios in London. I actually played the drums in Abbey Road Studios in London, all by myself. Because as you know, with music production, sometimes the band doesn't always play at the same time. Well, we didn't. And I had a beautiful moment. I was playing the drums with my feet, and I got in the headset from the control room. The recording engineer was amazed, wanted to compliment me, and he exactly said this: I know for a fact that Ringo would be jealous. So on that note, we'll let this play, and thank you for doing this, Dune. I really appreciate being on your show. You're a friend, you're a colleague, but more than anything, you're a great example of what we're trying to get out there as a message to our society, that we need to keep our attitude up and positive and optimistic. And as I said before, live in gratitude. I promise you it'll make a difference.
Yeah, I'm going to put a text here, and the copy and paste is playing tricks on me here. So let me just correct that, my friend. So let me see if I can get that back up there. No. I will correct that. But so I'm going to play here, and let's listen to it as we appreciate the work that went into this.
Yes, I can, suddenly, yes, I can. Gee, I'm afraid to go on has turned into, yes, I can. Take a look, what do you see? 133 pounds of confidence, me. Got the feeling I can do anything, yes, I can. Something that sings in my blood is telling me, yes, I can. I was just born today, I can go all the way, yes, I can. 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 Hey, yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can! Are you ready? I can climb Everest. Yes, I can. I can fight here all night and never rest. Yes, I can. I was just born today. I can go all the way. Yes! I can.
I've always felt musical. It was something that was in my blood. I used to bang on pots and pans when I was like 3, 4 years old. When you've been playing the drums for 45 years and you imagined in your basement